Good morning, everybody. How are you? Great to see you. And before we start with our refreshing good morning talk, I just want to show you a little detail. You might wonder why there's a link above the presentation. That's a link you can use to already post questions during our session. So we don't lose any thoughts. And afterwards we can like them, prioritize them, and also hopefully answer all of them. And
if something is pressing really hard, also just shoot it out. Don't worry.
And you do have the VLAN, you have your iPhone, so I'm sure it will work well. And before we start with the talk, a quick introduction to ourselves. This is Steffen Behn, our CTO, and formerly a product manager BMW, and still a petrol head on the weekends.
Well, it was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago, in his early days, or the old days. I'm Tina Dreimann. I'm business and agile coach at the Kartenmacherei. And in my old days, I was a management consultant, and luckily I switched to e-commerce quite a while ago and got to know all the cooler stuff like agile and lean and design thinking. And we're really happy that there's already such a really big crowd today for this talk. We're happy you're here, and we're also really glad that you didn't leave the room when you saw this slide. And you made it.
It was a long time ago.
It was more than 2 years ago, and I really think you're a really smart guy. And there's a lot of good stuff in this process. And the fun thing is that behind the red boxes, there are even more processes hidden.
There was a process for everything, basically.
Exactly. But the good news that already then we were working in agile teams. We did have, for example, a full prioritized backlog, and we had small agile developer teams with product owners. So we thought, hey, we're doing Scrum, we're working agile. We're fantastic.
We did Scrum. I mean, quite close to the Scrum best practice, I would say.
We did, exactly. But our product owners were the Gandalfs in the organization, and they were standing there saying, "You shall not pass!" Before every 2 or 4 weeks, you're sitting in a big prioritization meetings with 10 other peoples, and you have to fight on the totally wrong level on what is the next topic in the backlog, and then going to the developers. And the developers were really, luckily they were shielded, so they could really focus well, had small teams, they could choose their own names. We, for example, had unicorns as one team. But surprisingly, it failed. This really complex process failed, and we had 2 learnings from that. Don't throw a process at it. And really important to us is that you shouldn't escalate decisions just because they are difficult within a team. And shielding really smart people, our developers, from decisions that affect them is, I can't put it on any other way, plain stupid. And this is why we are here today. Firstly, to really convince you that there is an agile, and that this agile is much more motivating and cool than the old agile we used. And secondly, also to encourage everybody, if you're not doing it yet, to experiment in other ways of working, in new ways of team setups, really with more autonomy, smaller teams, with a purpose. And I hand over to you.
Yeah, I will give you a quick overview of what we do actually at Kartenmacherei. Don't worry, it will be just 3 sentences, hopefully. So we do cards. Kartenmacherei stands for kartenmakerei, if you want to. We do cards. We don't do Google Maps-like cards. We do printed cards, greeting cards, birth announcement cards, wedding invitations, etc. Really sexy. We are right now something around 130 people, 3 offices across Germany, Munich and Hamburg mainly. And there's one important fact which I want to go a little into detail, because it determined a lot of things about how we develop things and how we do product management. We call it that we have like a symbiosis of hardware and software. Yes, it's not a cool hardware, a phone thingy or something, but it's a product, right? It's an actual product which is somehow created in terms of product management, graphics, etc. Also needs to be launched, and there is production. And then there is the digital product, because we are our own and the only sales channel we have. So our online store is the only place. So there was always a big fight, like, who is actually the front runner in terms of innovation? Is it a product manager print, how we called it, or is it a product owner / product manager digital? And we never really figured it out, and we were looking in the past, we were looking for this unicorn who knows both, and it's almost not available because the print guys don't know how to talk to tech people and vice versa. So that was always an issue. Yeah,
and let me beam back now, however. This picture was taken more than 1 year ago, and at that time we were roughly 90 employees, and I was still head of shop management and international, so 2 things at the same time. And it was a very painful time for me, because the good part was over. We had managed a major relaunch in-house. We redesigned our brand and did a responsive front end. And we always thought that's the scapegoat, because we are slow. We are slow because we are in the relaunch phase. Then suddenly we were done. It was launched, but we didn't get any faster. And it was really frustrating, because in my shop management team, I did have quarterly goals, and I really like to set my own goals. But honestly, the things that we put down there couldn't be fulfilled by the team, because within the team, there was only the silo and the shop management. And I had to realign with other teams, with head ops, and we had 13 functions at that time. So I at least had to align with 5 other people to ensure the priorities were all in the right order. And usually they weren't, and you always had to escalate, go to the founder, Christoph, and say, please tell everybody we have to do this, because really we don't manage. And good thing is that I wasn't the only one in pain. And many people started talking to the leadership team.
So this is an actual quote. We translated it. Anna said it in German. But Anna is one of our most dearest employees. She's working with us since 2011. She started a couple of months before me. She was the 3rd employee. She started in the attic. Yeah, she started in the attic of my brother's house. And I mean, she went through several development phases, but in the last year, there was an actual quote. She came to my brother and me and she said, what the fuck, I really want to be as fast and have as much fun as I had in the old days. And what she meant with that is basically when we were small, when we were 4 or 5 people, we had no Jira, no nothing, and you just talked with each other and you simply said, okay, this is really the most highest priority right now, let's get this out of the way. There was one external developer, an agency, and he was working full-time for us, and it was really easy. There was no communication overhead. So Anna was luckily not the only one who felt the pain. It was us as well, and we thought about it, and we talked a lot about what actual problems we have, and I want to run through them a little with you. So first of all, prioritization, right? We had at that time, Tina already mentioned it, we had 3 individual development teams, all in their way cross-functional, meaning like a perfect scrum setup, product owner, back-end, front-end, and they basically were able to work on as they wish on their backlog. Their backlog was externally determined, but they were able to work on their backlog. But they couldn't prepare for it. They couldn't prepare for it because basically there was a bigger backlog. Yeah, there was a bigger backlog, which was then determined by some kind of priority meeting. And it was really painful because nobody was able to decide what is actually the highest priority. And it always ended up with them saying, Christoph, Steffen, you have to take a decision. And we actually didn't know the details anymore. So we had to take decisions of which we didn't know the details. So you take bad decisions all the time. And that was really frustrating. Secondly, for me, the most painful part was we're taking, every 3 months, we're taking an employee survey. And we basically ask a simple question, how likely would you recommend us as a company to your friends and family? And you can answer in a scale from 0 to 10. And what we saw, that the longer people stay with us, the less likely they were likely to recommend us. And that's really frustrating. And if you have a company and you see that, you're like, shit, those should be the most loyal people. They are staying with you since 5 years. Why aren't they happy? And we talk to people and people tell you it's normal. You have to accept that. People are very motivated at the beginning, but it settles in, it gets boring, it gets frustrating, especially if you grow. And we said that can't be it. We had, Tina already mentioned it, we were in a phase where we were growing over all the years before in between 160%, and we were slowing down, obviously because we were at that time since 2 years market leader in Europe, so it's not that easy to grow anymore if you're already on top, but we still didn't want to accept it because we had so many ideas, but we couldn't get them on the road. And also...
To add that it's a usual size that when you're getting above 70 employees, that's the time where you really have to rethink changing something completely.
Right. And one important fact was also for us, we work in a seasonal business. So yeah, we want to work agile, etc. But in the end, Christmas is always at the same time in the year. And if you want to get out things in before Christmas, then you have to launch them before. Otherwise, you won't have any impact. And the same goes for wedding. Even birthday is seasonal. You won't believe it, but people have their celebrations in the summer. So they send invitations for the big parties in the summer.
It's a bit like headless chicken. So everybody runs to this side now.
Yeah.
Oh, damn it. We missed the wedding and wedding season.
We were always
and then we
late.
all run to the other side. And then we run there. Oh, and we missed the little season from communion. Yeah. So it was just not good.
Yeah, and what was our answer? We reorganized teams. We reorganized everything. Every 2 months we reorganized something and it never had any traction. It just didn't change. There was always the same stupid discussions of different separated silos, right? So then came this moment where Anna came to us, and that evening we had some wine and we decided no more. And we already had started a time where we were already reading a couple of different books and tried to figure out if there are companies out there who had the same problem, and surprisingly there were. And we did a small road trip. We went around Germany, visited a couple of companies who had already changed the way they work. And we read a couple of books, and at that point we decided we want to actually fix 3 things. So first of all, we want really sustainable motivation with the team. And at that time we thought we still had to motivate. Nowadays we know we just cannot demotivate, and that's already enough. People are motivated by themselves. Secondly, we wanted prioritization doing the right way, meaning the people who know and the people who have that conflict should decide what is the highest priority, the people who actually know the details. And then again, we wanted to become smaller without firing people. So we wanted to become smaller in parts, more separated, more autonomous, and that only works in a small team. So
back to startups.
Back to startups, but without all the disadvantages of the startup. And we actually settled with one book, which is really easy to comprehend. It's not like a tough reader, and it's from Daniel Pink, and it's called Drive: What Really Motivates Us. And he gives a couple of interesting TED Talks about motivation. I really can recommend that. And basically he says there are 3 pillars which you have to achieve: purpose, mastery, and autonomy for people to be motivated. And Purpose, I think, is the word of the last couple of years. Everybody knows what it is. Mastery, it's not so much. So that's really about getting yourself better at something you do every day. And it's basically the inherent things of developers. So every developer, you ask why you are a developer, in the second or third sentence latest comes because I can keep on innovate myself, right? And it's not just mastery for yourself, but it's also for your team. And then autonomy. We don't really love the word autonomy anymore because it has a lot of misunderstanding.
Like
nowadays,
anarchy.
we would rather call it self-governing, self-organizing, and especially in Hamburg, autonomy has a very bad meaning since a couple of months. So our goal was, and we figured after reading the book, after talking to those companies, that the only way you can achieve those things is by having small, autonomous, cross-functional teams. And I mean, we were still conservative in our thinking. So we had a company of 90 people. We were financially successful. So why would you just throw it all away and do something completely new? So we were rather a little careful and started to do some experiment. And the experiment, which is most interesting for you guys probably, is like every shop, like every producing company, we have reclamations. People complain about things going wrong. And at that time, we had something like 0.6%. And still that was too high for us. We wanted to reduce it. And all the efforts we did try before ended up in the same priority discussions, etc. And like, no, it's the fault of the developers. No, it's the fault of the service team. No, it's anybody else's fault but mine. And so we did a small experiment, 2 days, 2 developers, 2 service people, 1 product manager, and they went together to our printing partner, put themselves into a room, and they had no external prioritization, guiding, nothing. They were just there to solve the problem. And they went out and solved it by reducing it by 50%. In 2 days. So down to 0.3, and that was something for us was like crazy.
And after doing several experiments, we decided that we really want to change the entire product organization. There was about 50 people at that time from the entire set. And we did do one thing. We got inspiration from the Spotify model. So we are working in squads and chapters nowadays. Plain business talk in a matrix organization. But our way of doing is a little bit different from Spotify because we decided that in our cross-functional teams, meaning in the cross-functional teams that include product manager, developers, there's no product owner, there's no lead. Because we had the difference, we have 3 business parts that are that need all the others. We wanted to make sure they figure it out without giving...
we know that a product owner is not a classical hierarchical position, but let's face it, most product owner positions are to some extent lived in that way that, I mean, if they set the backlog priority, they somehow decide on what the team is doing. They can do that good in talking to the team and figuring out what should be done.
But they can also be really bad. Yeah. I've seen that. And all the decisions are just put to them. So it's again another bottleneck. So we wanted to try it out without. And something else we did do a little bit differently is that we really put the whole value chain into our teams, meaning that it's more than I used to work earlier. We also put marketing inside of it, design, editorial. So they are really a whole unit that can function without any input from outside. And that was really important to us, that they are autonomous, sorry for the word, autonomous teams. So that's what kind of differentiates us from how we started. And now the question is certainly for you, like, how did you decide on, like, why to work like this? What are the cuts? And interesting, we told you before we had 13 functions. So we were very specialized. So we had product management, shop management, who also work with products, and we had UX within the shop management. And we even had designers, some designers who were responsible for just the card design, but others did digital banners. And we decided that is too complex and it's really restricting people. And so the first step was really to talk to people, like how we can reduce complexity within the functions. How can we build more generalistic domains?
And again, here the best example here is front-end development. Yeah. Before we had a markup team and a JavaScript team. Because when you talk to some people, they say, I don't want to do markup anymore. And some others say, I would love to do JavaScript one day, but I can't yet. And we talked to people and they were a little resisting in the beginning, but after telling them you have all the time you need, you get the coaching you need, you do the pairing you need, you do the code reviews you need, we decided, and that was just one of the, from 13 down to 7, where we went into the direction of having less specialist and more generalist. Yeah. Because otherwise you have, if you just want to have one function, or each function represented at least really once, you have a team of 13 people and you only have one backend developer.
And you don't have enough people to fill the squads.
Now didn't have enough people to fill the squads.
Now the question certainly is, what do you do with the... oops, I'm breaking the thing. How do you decide on the cross-functional teams? How do you form them? And I've talked to many other companies who did that, and a really good guess is go with the customer or customer needs. If you only have one customer group, try to slice it in customer needs and form a business really along the customer. So it is the first agile principle to deliver value to the customers. And our teams now are set up by the different customer groups we have, mostly, not only, but mostly. We have new vets. That team is really responsible for getting a better service, getting a better shop, getting better cards, better products to our newly engaged and the people who are just married. While the moms, I'm a mom myself, have totally different needs. We need it to be fast, we don't have any time. And we love the pictures of our babies. So there are really differences that the teams can work with to deliver better products and a better service. So that's something I would recommend again. And about the other team cut, like infrastructure, Steffen will tell something later. And the third step we did to get this done in one day, and that was November 16 last year, we put the entire team affected into, I'd say, almost one room. We had a workshop in Munich connected to a workshop in Hamburg because we have several offices. And we let the teams themselves decide in which team do you want to be. I mean, surely they couldn't, the backend developer couldn't become suddenly editorial content, but they could decide, do I want to start in new weds? Or do I want to go into the celebration squad? And we were really surprised.
Yeah, we scheduled 4 hours for that workshop, and it took 15 minutes. So
it took 50 minutes. And it was really easy because the people had different preferences. They had talked before. And surely there's also some things we could have done better, like defining certain rules, like seniorities should be more mixed across the team, stuff like this. So there are some learnings. But overall, we were really happy and proud that the team was so responsible and self-organized to get this done in 15 minutes. And we promised unfiltered and raw to you. So now we're starting with letting our pants down. And since usually I'm the one wearing the skirt, Steffen gets to do that.
Great. I will start with the things which didn't work out. So there are several things which didn't work out as planned, of course. But 3 things I want to focus on. First of all, conflict. I will go into detail in a second. Infrastructure, Tina already mentioned it. Thank you. And the third thing is, and that was one of the toughest one, long-term versus short-term thinking, right? So for what's about conflict? That's really, really deep ingredient of cross-functional work. there is conflict and it has to be surfaced. And if it's not surfaced, all the cross-functionality doesn't help you at all. So don't get me wrong, but if introverted developers sit with extroverted marketeers and the marketeer always talks and the developer never talks, then you have a problem. Because what you don't do? Legacy. You don't do anything like that. You just do the next product, because it makes so much sense. And that's exactly what happened over the first years of Kartenmacherei. That's why we had to work with Arne and some other people from PHBCC to get rid of legacy. We're still on it.
Half year.
And it obviously had to happen in this setup as well, even though we were talking a lot about it. The first quarter of OKRs, those are our objectives per quarter, didn't include a single legacy refactoring. So why was that? Even though we talked about it, is because decisions were taken by the loudest in the team. And we had to work a lot on that because, like I said, we don't have a person responsible for taking per se decisions in the team, and it's also not consensus, and it's also not democracy. So how does it actually work? It works that the decisions are taken by the right people. It sounds very general and it sounds very unprecise, but it's actually quite straightforward. A developer shouldn't decide on which is the most beautiful banner, and a graphics artist shouldn't decide on if we do test-driven development or not. And if the team lives up to that, they have the right arguments with the right people. So it's not always those 10 people of a team sitting together for everything and having bigger meetings now. That's actually the opposite of it. Infrastructure squad, yes. So the idea was quite good, I would say. Of course, I have to say that. So infrastructure was supposed to be a team who were focusing on getting our core technologies better, meaning more focusing on legacy and doing rather bigger projects. They were also responsible, even though we work with a managed hosting, they were at least supposed to take care of, let's say, the link and in kind of a way a DevOps role as well. And they were also supporting, very important, only supporting releases. So everybody, from the beginning we said we have end-to-end responsibility for the squad, so they code, test and ship. But what happened in the end, infrastructure obviously took care of the releases because they were the guys who knew best, and they were the guys who knew best what to do when something goes wrong. At that time, we only deployed every 2 weeks, so there was a lot of things going wrong. And basically, they were taking care of all kinds of things which other squads didn't want to do. So if there came up a bug, the other squad said, I think infrastructure takes care of that. So what obviously happens is this, right? Infrastructure squad was completely overloaded. They couldn't focus on legacy. They were just running, doing hot fixes. And they took out exactly the integral part of our cross-functional idea that the squad has end-to-end responsibility. They had somebody to load it off to. And what happens? They do it. Unconsciously, but they do it. So that's basically, they were simply the catch-all for shit. that's how, I mean, yeah, that's how it was.
One quote was, they always destroy the code and we have to fix it.
Yeah, right. They ship new stuff, they don't take care of it properly, and we have to fix it. Yeah. And last but not least, I want to talk to you about long-term versus short-term. Again, we don't believe that there was a bad intention of the teams, but if you're a new team and you feel like, yeah, we want to get shit done, what do? You do low-hanging fruits. You do the things which you were already aware of. You know, you have some impact there, not too much, but you have some impact, and you can get that out there. And there's a lot of connection to business thinking here, but there's also a lot of connection to development thinking. So again, simple example, what do I do if there comes in a bug? Nothing critical, something you can fix in the next sprint, nothing crazy. So in my point of view, there are a couple of different ways of how you could fix that bug. First thing, and that happened mostly, you can just fix the symptom, right? It's gone, nobody sees it anymore, somebody else will figure out the rest later. Second thing is you could at least refactor the code. Already that, the code responsible for the bug, already that didn't happen quite often. And the argument was always the same. We don't have time for that. And if you have listened slightly at least, then you would all agree that that's a wrong answer, because nobody defines anymore how much time you have to fix a bug. You decide as a developer, because you have nobody who tells you you have to do this in this sprint, and you have 1 week, and you only have 20% overhead, and you have to do legacy in your overhead. It doesn't happen anymore. So the developer can and has to, and that's the important part, stand up and say, no, I won't do anything. In worst case, strike, I told them. I won't code anything new until I manage to solve this bug. And if you're then really good, and we're talking about legacy stuff, not about the shiny new things we have, but legacy, then at least write a test for it so that also the bug, even though you refactored it, shouldn't appear anymore. If it appears, you know about it, but without a customer calling. And that didn't happen often enough. And now Tina can talk about the things which worked well.
Yeah, and you probably might wonder what is the basis for why we tell you it worked well. So what's the data behind it? And if you have a business without seasonalities and no changes in marketing invest, I think it's easy to see because your KPIs will change. Now you've heard that we have many different seasonalities. We have over 30 categories, and in addition to that, we also invested majorly, heavily in marketing at the beginning of the year, at the same time that we changed the organization to create a bigger distance to the followers in the market. So it was really hard to distract, like, what effect is the team, or is it just the investment? And the only way to do it was to ask the team. And we wrote down the reasons why we changed the organization, and then let the teams rate, like, how was it before? What's your grade you give us? And how do you rate us now? Now, the question is certainly what were these factors you wanted to rate? Firstly, it was a closer collaboration between the functions, so the silos are gone. The second one was that we have a better customer focus. That's why we changed it. In addition to that, more responsibility for the teams, personal growth, team happiness, innovation, and speed.
Let me jump in there, because we didn't mention it earlier. We always talk about getting closer to the customer. So what does it actually mean? I mean, how often have you seen developers or tech teams being like 2 or 3 layers away from actual customers? For us, we do customer events where we do a coffee, something with moms, for example, and the whole team is with them. Even though there are sometimes Ukrainian developers and they don't understand everything, they are there and they get the whole thing. And they told us afterwards that it was like a crazy shift of mind, because they see what problems the customer actually have themselves. So they are in the first line now. Sorry.
Almost always. There are also some...
Not always.
Some who don't like it and want to have a different customer, but that's a different story. So back to the rating. And these were the criteria. And the surprising thing for me wasn't that we didn't do a trade-off and something improved and something else got worse. It was that we had a grade point average on the old side, on before, worse than 3.5, like somewhere 4, somewhere 3. And all of the factors to now increased. So the team was saying on everything of these factors we got better. I mean, there's still some we have to work on, but really on everything we got better, and that was really impressive to me. Most importantly, what got better was the silos are totally gone, because our teams are sitting together, they are working together in the agile cycles. They know each other, they discuss their problems, and you change the social context, the in-group, out-group. Before we put them into cross-functional teams, before we formed cross-functional teams with them, they always went okay, the developers are the bad guys, they are not fast enough, and we are so good, but we prepared the whole story. And we have the definition of ready, everything is there, but we're waiting and nothing happens. So it was always the bad guys, and it totally dissolved because there's a mutual understanding between each other's problems and why things have to take long sometimes.
I mean, funny thing, since then I've never heard a developer complain about that the story isn't good enough. Not because the stories got better, they got way worse. But they know what's actually in there. They don't need
they talk about it.
A huge amount of acceptance criteria, and if they need it, they write it themselves because they were in the conversation at the same table when they talked about the actual feature and the actual purpose for the customer.
And that's really when I enjoy working with the teams, when you, for example, have a planning and you already see the sparks going between the different heads. Like really syncing together, there's a backside of that form and then I have to program it as well in the configurator. And the designers think about, then I need a design for that too. And they realize early what mistakes they might make. So they can preempt things because they talk to each other. Quite a simple thing. The second part, you already brought an example for that, is the customer focus. We are ready for Christmas this year. We weren't the last years because we gave a team the focus and it could think about it the whole year. Certainly there are also other things, not only Christmas in it, but it's there and it's small enough as a business to be manageable. Yeah,
simple example, they put it into their Q2 and Q2 and Q3 objectives to be ready for Christmas. It sounds awful, but it was really good for them.
Yeah, because they didn't have to work on the wedding season because it's in another squad. And what's really interesting is that many people stayed in retros and whatever, that they're more motivated. And I still have to figure out what's the real driver for that, whether it's autonomy or whether it's they have the responsibility or also because they have a broader field and their personal growth. Like we're not only doing retention marketing, but also online marketing. We learn constantly. We have to learn, otherwise we can't do what we need to do in a team. I can't answer that yet, but it's fun to watch. And to close the positive side, I brought one beacon of hope, I would say, for the infrastructure problem. One example from my favorite team. I like to work with the moms. And
taking sides here.
One of my favorites.
Yes. Okay.
The kartenmacherei is my favorite team to work with. Good. One example, we did a retro and we used exactly this rating I told you about, and the worst rating was the speed. So let's do a retro about speed, why we are bad at speed. And the answers weren't like, we talk too much in the daily, we talk too much in the planning. But it was really, we took so long to ship a product in particular, because we have old systems, because the system we have wasn't built for the product we wanted to launch, because we never went back to refactor it. And it wasn't the developers in the retro stating these facts. It was everybody. And it didn't matter whether designer or product manager, they were all agreeing that we need to go and refactor. And they learned that, and they see the necessity now, so they give the room.
Yeah, and it was actually a product or feature set with, 10 features. If you break it down into features, it was simple functionality. Sounds simple. It's a product called Photobox, and it basically needed our configurator. We have a configurator for the cards
to individualize.
To individualize it, exactly. And so cards have fixed amount of pages. It's quite clear, right? But with Photobox, you can choose how many photos you actually want to print. It's like this old Polaroid style photos.
And you put it in a box.
The simple one-line feature which took 3 months was we want to be able to change the amount of photos inside the configurator. And because nothing was prepared for that, and we were always afraid of that feature, and that's why we never built it, and they just said, we do it. And I mean, it turned out to be wrong to put it into the first rollout, because that prolonged the whole release of that feature for 3 months.
It was not an MVP.
It was not an MVP. But the cool thing was again that the business people never mentioned that it was the developers' fault that it took so long, but they said we were so stupid to put that into the minimum requirement set. And that click I have very seldomly heard before.
And to summarize the good and the bad stuff, to end with a note, one really important basis to have an agile transformation to succeed, even to go from agile to another agile, is the mindset and the culture. And if you haven't seen it before, the growth versus the fixed mindset, and also if you had kids, I really recommend look into that. Google management trainings also build on that sometimes. It is a different how people see change. If you don't see mistakes as a threat, it doesn't matter if you don't manage to meet the first sprint goals. There was one team who was really afraid and perfectionist in the beginning, and it was horrible for them to work in the scrum mode because they were always like not getting things done. But to use it as a learning opportunity, that okay, the next time we get better. We didn't make it yet. Let's use it to improve. It's a tool, not a knife that can kill us. That's really important that you help the teams. First, it's good if you already have it in the teams, and secondly, that you help the teams to get better at that and to ensure that there's a failure culture as well. It's okay to make mistakes. And certainly, you might have already gotten our DNA. we don't stop, so we're still or already working on new things. So we are having a new try at the infrastructure, the tech stack. Steffen can tell more about that, and you wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, we very seldomly nowadays say no to an opinion. But there's one where I strongly oppose, and it's when somebody says we have to stop changing so fast. And it's coming back to the picture. We still have that sometimes, and it's obvious that if you recruit so many people, and then you change the whole mindset of the company, that not everybody works with that. And we have to talk to those people.
You know, I wanted you to tell about the
tech stack.
I
know, tech stack. And I'm coming to that because when people saw that infrastructure was dissolving themselves, because it actually was their own decision to dissolve themselves, they said, now finally we have something which works better. And then some others said, yeah, not everything is perfect, but let's optimize. And we said, no, why? Let's change, keep on changing things. And there were people reluctant to that in the first moment. But right now, we're having an experiment. We want to get out one more optimization, one more legacy system out the way before Christmas. And we formed a tech stack team. Sophisticated name for a very simple thing. It's basically me in a position of product owner again, or technical product manager, and 3 developers, and we sit in one table. They come from each squad, and they now tackle our basket. Our shopping cart. And it's now 2 weeks and we're almost done. And it's a really cool feeling. And that might be an evolution in the direction of having bigger problems which are completely across squad to get them out of the way. So we feel our whole organization to become more fluid and more adaptive to things which we see. We don't think that squads are the answer for everything, the world and the universe, but we rather think that they are the answer for our main problem and we have other answers for other problems.
And why do you think it's better than infrastructure?
Because it has a purpose. So they have a clear purpose. They have a clear customer. They are determining themselves what is important. They don't have this externally determined backlog. They say, we want to solve this problem, and that's the way we do it, and not like, please do this feature there because we need it. Not like that. But it's an experiment.
It's an experiment, and what I like about it is that it's a task force. So you decided this is an important topic, and it was not a top-down decision, but we all know it's critical to do it. So let's form a team who really gets the time and the focus to fix it. And we're doing additional things because the teams, our cross-functional teams, are quite large sometimes. Some are only 4 people, but others are 14 now. So they have to also get into, I don't want to call it less or anything, but they have to constantly reform and go into smaller groups. And once they are done with something, reform into something else. It's a constant reorganization, even within the team, to get things done. Yeah,
and last we defined with the team out of a company-wide retrospective a need for some new roles inside the team, not roles per se, like that's your only role, but rather additional roles to your standard role, which are Agile Minds. They're basically satellites of the Agile coaches. They get a specific training on Agile mindset, Agile. Everything Agile above the normal stuff, right? So you know what's Scrum, but you don't maybe know exactly the reasons why you do the things the way you do them. So they can interact in every meeting or every conversation which happens in the squad and go against things which don't make sense.
They are basically the devil's advocate because we're only 2 coaches, so we can't do everything. We need multipliers. And it's a role that shouldn't be dedicated to one person. In the end, we want everybody in the company to be Agile Minds in that sense. So if you're interested in it, you can enhance your knowledge in that area. But it's important, I think, that there is somebody in the team who also drives the customer focus, who drives the cutting things into smaller pieces, to focus, ensure that the communication flows. And we're starting with different roles, so there's also like a business mind role. It's not a total product owner in that sense, but somebody who's now working with the team on a longer vision. Because earlier you heard we are missing the long-term vision if you're just focused on the low-hanging fruits. So there are some answers we're finding, and last but not least, we're even like transforming the agile and cross-functional working mode to other teams, our support teams, for example, where we also want to transform the learnings or the success we could see in the other teams to our support teams, and hopefully, last but not least, also to the customer service team next year.
Yeah, so to come back, and that's how we want to round it up, to come back to the initial picture. That was before the transformation. Who can see developers? They're here, up there, far in the back, right? And I promise you that we didn't stage it. That was this year's team event. And it could be by coincidence, but there is a developer, here's a developer, there. So it's completely here. It's completely mixed. And I think it's a good indicator. Yeah, and that's it. I think we overrun the time a little, but we still have some minutes for questions. There are 3 questions here. 4, sorry. So the first one, let me show it to you. If we have some ideas or techniques how to break up actually into customer-focused teams. I think for us it was quite easy, but not as easy as it seems, because we have clear customer groups, but we also have Some people might call it catch-all team celebrations. They're doing several celebrations in families, but I think we're in a good position. But we also clearly decided against the way Spotify does it. They broke it up more into, so for example, they have a team search. Mm-hmm. And they have a clear technical focus on search, and we decided clearly against that with all the downsides which it brings, but we decided against it. So what does it mean? Everybody has to work into the shop repository. Everybody has to work into the configurator repository.
When I'm looking at the question, I also have an answer, because you say you're selling into education in the USA. So I see two options. The first thing is, who are they? Are they different types of schools? Who asked the question?
Yeah, no, we write our own product
Mm-hmm.
and sell that worldwide. And when they think, how do you then say, so simple background, the product is software distribution.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody distributes software. So how do you then start saying, well, they distribute differently to these guys? It doesn't really happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's just looking for the access or ideas on how
So,
to.
do the countries have different needs? Like, does the education system different, and therefore?
Yeah, just I would struggle how to back that into what we would break it up into.
Yeah. Or could you?
It could well be that we should follow the Spotify model, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, you could always.
Ginny did.
Yeah.
What Ginny did is, like, really put it into process steps. I would say, really, what is the customer doing at that point of time? And then cut a bucket from it.
And then you have a bigger, probably, I don't know how many guys you are, but then you have one bigger scale, which is Tribe, which Spotify is using, which we also started using now. We didn't put it in because it's too much detail, but basically it's a group of squads which work on one purpose then again. Mm-hmm. And they have a non-hierarchical tribe lead, meaning somebody is working with the squads, but is working on aligning them.
Yeah,
maybe afterwards we talk for a second. Yeah. So how often do you release? Depends. It's the most favorite answer, right?
I want daily.
Yeah, I mean the goal is clear, and in all the new technologies we have, it's already possible to release every hour, every minute, wherever we want, seamless. But we still have a big legacy monolith in the background, Magento. Yeah, so you guys know the problem. So we are right now, Magento is being released every 2 weeks, and if there are dependencies, then it's released together. But we're trying to decouple it as much as possible. And in terms of the whole front end for the customer, it's its own application. Huh?
And to replace it.
And to replace it, yeah. Do you still have a management layer or layers?
That's a really good question. We have chapter leads, and so I wouldn't call it above. But if you remember the matrix organization, they are the how do you say Klammer? They put the bracket. They are the bracket for the people working in the squads and are responsible to push the vision and the quality in their teams.
So you could say before team lead is now a chapter lead, but there's a clear definition now, even though it's not achieved 100%, but the goal is that a chapter lead only uses 20% of its time for its chapter lead role, because it's just a role, and he's still part of a normal team. So a chapter lead backend is a backend developer in a squad.
And so what leadership do we have? Generally, I think anybody can lead in their field, so that's not just a personal thing. But we did do it by I would say, almost agile book. And we put the king of leadership into the content, like the expert of the chapter lead. And we also have coaches. So I do see the coach as a leadership role as well. Because we can quite mess with our impact as well. So it includes responsibility, and we have the board.
Yeah, but for me, the important part in the question is the above. So I don't see that anymore. I rather see it as supporting functions nowadays. So it's
behind?
Behind? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Do we think of a chapter lead as PO?
No.
No.
Okay.
Oh.
Secondary question, if you have the chapter leads, how did the team that ended up with this one-liner piece of functionality that had a massive MVP, how did they end up in that state? If you had a chapter lead that is supporting them,
Let me think.
when the MVP is okay.
Let me think about it. Is there even a chapter lead in their team? Because the chapter lead is in the chapter, not in the squad. So he leads technically. So basically, it's simply said, the squad decides on what to work on, and the chapter decides how to work on things. So they decide we work in pair programming, or we want to do test-driven development. But that's all they do. They don't have capacity. Obviously, they should raise their voice if they see something which is going on, but it doesn't always happen, because that's one of the disadvantages of having those squads, and which we clearly accepted, that you have you have a separation, and not everybody knows everything all the time.
And so there's a clear rule. Wednesday is chapter day. So the chapter should use the time exactly for this, to spare, for example, on an MVP I came up with. And honestly, I think particularly that MVP, we all saw it. You saw it, I saw it.
But we didn't want to...
But we didn't have the know-how or the guts to say this is bullshit. It's too much.
Yeah.
Next time we will know better. I hope.
And again, the above for me is the important part, because no, the board isn't above anymore, because we don't have any reporting meetings anymore. So it's now completely turned around. We sit there doing nothing until somebody asks us for our opinion. And we don't really want to give an opinion like a per se approval where people say like, I really want to know what you say. No, please come with a proposal, come with something you're really convinced of, and then we will challenge that idea, and not the other way around. And just from a what makes sense, not from an approval.
And I know Steffen likes to see it this way, but I slightly disagree, because I think anybody should wait until sparing comes. But also when I see something where I think it's not going in the right direction, I should voice it.
I don't disagree.
So it's not total letting loose, do everything you want. So on the one hand, we live in La La Land at Kartenmacherei, but not in this way.
So Lucas is asking how we actually schedule and allocate cross-functional teams. So whenever do we do team changes? And the correct answer is we don't know yet. So we tried out different things. So it came from the team, like infrastructure, where they dissolved themselves because they didn't see any purpose in what they were doing. And it also came from, I think, one developer advocate, Sebastian, who gave a speech or talk yesterday, who said like, hey, I would really like to get out the basket. Let's try to build up this task force before Christmas. And in the end, we're trying to figure that out. But one important thing is we didn't try to go into changing the company with having an answer for everything. So we said we will figure out an answer when we need it, not right now. Let's focus on the problems for right now.
Lucas, did we get the question right? Like what's... Okay, good. Then I'll...
Because you started reorganizing basically every proposed what he wants to do, and then you let it figure it out. But if like times change and it becomes very hectic, or new external requirements come like stakeholders, then would you let the teams reorganize themselves and say, okay, how do we react to it?
I mean, what we do is we didn't talk about it too much because we focused on what we call the core. We have new ventures where a team works on a completely new business idea, and that one, for example, comes up because some people in the company have a great idea, and then it's some kind of a recruitment inside the company first of all.
And
so that happens.
Is responding to external.
But there's a really good quote from somebody at Spotify for that. If you want to know exactly who takes a decision at what time, you're in the wrong place. So it's not everything. There is not a process, a definition for everything. We're just trying to have the right discussion when it's necessary.
And it's a mix as well for me, because, for example, we're now working on really what our big levers for the core teams are. And for example, the business mind is doing it together with the team to come up with that spares in the company to really get good ideas that hopefully will create revenue. But he also sees when he won't need developers. So maybe the idea is to create a new channel. So we use, for example, wedding location as channels. We don't need a developer for that. And they will say it. So they
just
won't
happened
just
with
keep
celebrations.
exactly. They just don't keep the developers because they are there.
So celebrations, the one squad just said that honestly, we see ourselves working the next couple of months on nothing where we need major development support, so our developers can rather go to other teams.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's for me the best case, right? If nobody on top has to say, there's too many people, and in the final goal, we have positions per squad, and the squad hires people internally or externally when they need, and when they see that their numbers, it makes sense, because now they have complete access to all their financial numbers, that if they see it makes sense for them to hire one more senior developer, they can do it. We're not there yet, but that would be a lovely vision for me. There's one more question, at least here in this tool, how we deal with decisions that affect multiple squads. I would say, again, there is no catch-all answer, but I think the most important or the best fit is chapters, again. So they align over squads. So if there's, for example, we want to try out a new technology, that normally comes from a chapter. Or if somebody, or if the whole team decides that our configurator is so, sorry to use the word, fucked up, that we have to rewrite it, that should come from the chapter, and it will affect all squads.
And I have one rule of thumb for the decision making for me is it always depends on which decision you have to make. So you should think beforehand what's the decision and who do you need to make that decision. And it's a simple example is the development and promotion structure for our employees. We can just lock ourselves up and come up with something, but we can also decide, hey, we need input from a really good BI guy because he's good with numbers, and we do it together with him. And we need one from the board, and to really, depending on what we do, get the right people into the boat and then manage the process that it runs effectively.
Okay, so since we run completely out of time,
the bigger the decision, like you should, or when it's a real big decision, you should make sure that you had an advisory process, and not maybe only internally but also externally. So that's why Arne is also often in our house.
Yeah. Thanks everybody. If there are any more questions, we will still be here a couple of minutes. So feel free to come to us and ask.
Thank you.